Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inspira Advantage webinar on what to do with your summer, the pre-med edition. We have two fantastic panelists here with us who are consultants with Inspira Advantage and help med student or aspiring med students with their applications. And I'll have them introduce themselves in just a second. Inspira Advantage is a med school application consulting company, and we help aspiring medical professionals through the planning process of applying to med school or other schools in the medical fields. We help with everything from test prep essays, extracurricular choices, everything through applying, and also applications through residency and beyond. I want to thank you all for joining us today. So today we'll introduce our panelists. We'll talk about the importance of utilizing your summer effectively. We'll talk about some summer activities that you can look into, academic enrichment opportunities. We'll talk about how to identify your goals and interests and how that can help you plan your summers. We'll go into some extra tips and tricks, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, pop your question in the Q&A box and we'll get to those at the end. So we have Nate and Neil here with us today. Nate, can you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Nate. I am an incoming fourth year in my program. I'm in the USC Caltech MD-PhD Program, and I am in the second year of my neuroscience PhD.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Nate. And Neil, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, everyone. I'm Neil. Been with Inspira for a while. I went to Michigan for medical school, reviewed a bunch of applications out there, graduated, and went to NYU, where I am now, for my dermatology residency. And excited to talk with y'all.
Awesome. Thanks for being here as well, Neil. All right, so we'll dive right in and talk about the importance of utilizing your summer effectively for pre-med students. Nate, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll start off. So it's important to use your summer wisely, pre-med student, and can be a window of opportunity to enhance your medical journey. Summers provide the time and flexibility to engage in activities that deepen your understanding of the medical field, build practical skills, and bolster your competitiveness for medical school admissions. Just going off of this slide, I think it is really important to use these summer opportunities because they give you an opportunity to usually do something new with your application, maybe an activity that you wouldn't have had time with during the school year, where you can really actually devote yourself to the activity. And it's a large window of time. You have several summers throughout your pre-med journny. I use this time for different opportunities, and I think it's a good time to sort of take stock of like where your application is at, sort of from an activity standpoint, and identifying maybe potential weaknesses, or if you're sort of low on shadowing hours, low on volunteer hours, and use that time as an activity to use that time as an opportunity to address those activities of those big buckets that maybe you haven't had the time to do and address in the school year.
Fantastic. Neil, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think that was great. I agree 100%. I think the summers, just like Nate said, are a time to kind of review what you have done already, what your application looks like, and find ways to improve or bolster your application. It is time that you really have dedicated to doing really whatever you want, but it is helpful to be strategic about thinking about how you can use that time effectively, maybe build a new skill that you think will be useful in the future. Whether it's in medical school training or in your undergrad training, or just in life. And yeah, I think being thoughtful about how to use your summer, which we'll chat with you about as we go on, is super important.
Great. Thank you both so much. All right, skip the slide there. So let's talk about some activities for pre-med students, some things that you can fill your time with in the summer. Neil,
yeah, so I think this is a popular one. I think volunteering at a hospital or clinic, and I think it's popular because for better or worse, it's for the most part required for a medical school application that you've at least spent some time in a hospital. You know what being a doctor is like, or working with healthcare teams is like, interacting with patients, and understanding what challenges and rewards come with a career in healthcare or as a physician. Um, for the most part, I think people end up doing this at different times throughout their undergraduate experience or even beforehand. You can do it during school hours, you can do it during the summer. I don't think personally it should be the only thing you do during a summer. I think it's something that you can incorporate into whatever you're doing on the side, because hours can be flexible and you can sort of multitask here, which is again why I think a lot of people do it during the school year as well, either after classes, on weekends, etc. But it is a super valuable experience if it's something that you have not been able to do during your undergrad, during the school year for whatever reason. I think this summer is a good time to take that opportunity.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I fully agree with Neil on using it as an opportunity to get some of those hours. I've talked about in some of our previous webinars. I think with volunteering, there's sort of this point of diminishing returns that you reach with volunteering. It's a necessary component of your medical school application, but you don't have to have like 1,000 volunteer hours to be a competitive applicant. Sort of the thing I address when I talk with some of my clients about volunteering is you want to approach it with what skills you are also gaining from the volunteer experience. So if there's at a certain point where you feel like maybe you're not getting as much new skills or experience or exposure in a clinical setting, it may be a good opportunity to pivot and look at other opportunities to be still involved in a healthcare setting, but maybe not through direct volunteer hours. However, if you don't have those hours, this is now a really good time to sort of uninterrupted get some of that hours.
All right. So shadowing a healthcare professional.
Yeah, so similar and sort of in the same vein to volunteering, shadowing is just an opportunity to get exposure in a medical setting. Admissions committees really like to see that you know sort of what you're getting into when you're getting into medical school, that you've demonstrated thorough interest in the field. I think it's a really good opportunity to shadow in a variety of specialties. You don't need to have all these hours in one specific medical specialty unless you're really determined into going into that field. I think it's a great opportunity to explore, to sort of shop around and see how the different specialties are different, and sort of find what interests you. It's a really good opportunity to build relationships with clinicians and an opportunity to also sort of get some letters of recommendation. Especially if you're interested in applying into osteopathic medicine and going to a DO school, taking this as a time to have shadowing hours with DOs. This is a really good time to get opportunity. I think another thing when it sort of comes to letters of recommendation, if you do a lot of shadowing in the summer, and maybe this is 2 or 3 years before you actually are planning to apply to medical school, it's a good time to maybe even ask them at the end of the summer just to write a letter of recommendation or a letter of support, just in case in a few years you want to come back and use that recommendation for your application.
All right. Let's talk about some research internships.
Yeah, so research internships are, I think, one of the activities that you can embark on during a summer that you may not really have time to devote yourself to throughout this school year. And I think they are beneficial to medical school applications. I think a lot of academic programs, which most medical schools are, value some sort of academic endeavor or research endeavor, something showing that you've understood the scientific method and understand the work it takes to publish scientific literature, not even necessarily publish, but at least do it. And it's easier to do that when you can dedicate yourself, for a couple of months or a couple of weeks to a specific project with mentorship or under the guidance of a PI in a lab. For someone like Nate, especially maybe going to an MD-PhD program, this might be especially useful even for me who was not going into an MD-PhD program. I found my research internships really valuable because it taught me how to evaluate scientific literature from the perspective of someone who had done it. And it kind of gave me an inside window into how we derive the treatment algorithms or diagnostic tests that we have in practice. So I think this is a super valuable experience that a summer can help you experience. It's important to plan ahead for these because sometimes these spots go quickly, and I think planning a few months or even more than a few months in advance for a research internship you really want is important. I didn't do that my first year and kind of had to scramble. Yeah, I'm excited to hear if Nate has anything to add from the MD-PhD perspective.
Yes. So I think overall, like research is a big bucket in applications. That doesn't mean you absolutely have to have research in your application to be a successful medical school applicant. However, it will definitely be necessary for MD, PhD applications. You should have substantial research experience. And I think the summer is a really good opportunity to have uninterrupted time to focus on your research and really devote yourself to that activity. It becomes really hard to sort of balance it during the school year. I think one of the things I've learned throughout the course of my pre-med journey was just all the opportunities for summer funding for research that is offered. So there are many schools often, there are many programs often within your home institution, whichever college you ended up attending, that provide stipends and fellowships for your research, as well as training programs or programs for underrepresented in medicine students that give you an opportunity to get first involved with research. I think another thing that students don't often always consider as well is there's also huge opportunities for research at other institutions around the country. There are many schools that offer about 8-week programs in different medical specialties and disciplines to do research and get involved with research. And you also get paid, stipended. You get an opportunity to go and see another university or institution and get some experience there. It's great for networking and building new connections. Yeah, I think that's most what I have with research. I think if you do decide to get involved with research, it's really important to at least at some point sort of embark on your own individual project. So something that you can take ownership over, something that you're responsible for in a project that you are directly involved with, maybe either getting started or taking from the early stages to fruition. I think it's also a good opportunity to take whichever projects you work on and sort of start to think about maybe conferences that you can present your work at for posters or oral presentations. And my last point that's sort of touching on research, if you are not somebody who enjoys bench research, there are so many opportunities to get involved in medical research outside of pipetting. I know a lot of people who are involved with health and health policy research, public health research that has nothing to do with being at a lab bench, but is still a really incredible opportunity that bolsters your research skills and thinks about what kind of science you want to do from your perspective.
All right, let's talk about becoming a medical scribe.
Yeah, so this was actually something I did over my summers. It is a little bit more limited now to have that with programs having the flexibility to allow you to do them over summers. But sort of what a medical scribe does is they work with a doctor directly to document the patient encounter. I think, especially when it comes to like after maybe you've put in so many hours of volunteering and you're ready for that next step, you'll have greater capabilities to do these activities like medical scribing. I thought it was a really useful use of my time during the summer. It taught me a lot. I personally worked in an emergency department starting, I think, the summer after my freshman year. And I continued that up through my junior year. I was also able to work that in with other things because being a medical scribe, you're often like per diem or part-time, which allows you the flexibility to do other activities over the summer. I got exposure to a lot of different types of cases in the ER. I saw everything, I feel like. So I had like a wide knowledge base when I was starting medical school. And it really gets you into the process of thinking like a physician. You learn a lot about the medical decision-making process, how doctors decide what tests to order. And it sort of gives you a jump start that when you start to go into when you start your medical school journey, you actually have a good idea of how documentation is created. When I started medical school, I started going into the clinics within my first couple of weeks. And my preceptor was always really impressed with my patient notes because I had that exposure where I knew exactly what went into a patient interview and how to document that patient interview. I maybe didn't have all of the physical exam skills or all of the ideas about diagnostics yet, but I had a huge base of information on just how to conduct a patient interview, which is the beginning of any medical encounter. I think it's a really useful way to utilize your time when you're a pre-med. It has a lot of perks to it just in terms of like building foundational knowledge in medicine, as well as building medical skills for documentation, which is something that a lot of physicians are usually not always as good at or as happy about. So it's a great opportunity to sort of get that head start in medicine. And it allows for a lot of flexibility.
Awesome. Thanks for talking about your experience there.
Neil, do you have anything to add? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing to note too, one, I will echo that what Nate said is true. I did not scribe when I was an undergrad, and there was a stark difference between me and the people that had scribed in terms of their knowledge base and how comfortable they felt when they first entered the clinical setting. You could definitely see that. Eventually, I think everyone does catch up to speed, but I think that is a helpful kickstart to medical school. The other thing to think about too is when you're a medical scribe, you're kind of shadowing at the same time. So you're knocking out a couple of things with being a medical scribe, and you're building a relationship, especially if you are scribing with one physician constantly. You're building a pretty longitudinal relationship with that physician, and one where they love you, because everyone hates documentation. So they're going to write you probably a pretty good letter if you ask for it later on, especially if you did a good job. So I think that is important to note as well. And it's something that's true for, I'd say, probably the last three of those that we just talked about: shadowing, research, and being a medical scribe. Is developing a longitudinal relationship with your mentor, the person you're working with, will probably lead to a good letter later on. And that's pretty important when putting together your medical school effort.
Yeah, like Neil said, it is a lot like knocking out the box of shadowing, but you get paid to do it, which is an incredible opportunity. I also think it was like one of the most enjoyable ways I spent my time as a pre-med. It was always like a job I was looking forward to going into because it was always constantly exciting.
All right. So let's talk about some academic enrichment opportunities.
Yeah, so extracurricular stuff is definitely, what we've been harping on mostly so far, but, curricular stuff is important too, especially if you are somebody, for example, who throughout undergrad for the first year or two, were thinking of doing something completely different, and you've made a switch to decide to do medicine. This is a good way to maybe catch up on some courses that you may have missed out on. And still have a relatively accelerated application timeline. On the other hand, it's an opportunity to boost GPA or take classes that you may not have performed as well on initially. You can kind of go back, repeat that, strengthen your fund of knowledge, and do better the second time around. If there are classes that you just feel like, I wish I had a better understanding of this, but it's not required for my major, it's not required for being a pre-med. For example, in my college, anatomy was not required as a course to be a pre-med or to enter medical school, but looking back on it now, I think it would have been super helpful to have a basic fund of knowledge in anatomy going in. So I think the summer is an opportunity for that as well. You can be thoughtful about, what sorts of things do I need to get to medical school, or what sorts of things do I think I would benefit from before I enter medical school, or just before I leave college. So this is definitely one experience to think about.
Yeah, I have to echo everything that Neil said. I think summer courses are really a great opportunity. I took a lot of summer courses. I think one of the biggest opportunities to be strategic with sort of planning summer courses is there may be a course at your home institution that is known as like a GPA killer, where it is just like sort of egregiously difficult for no reason, and the professors like sort of designed it just to weed out pre-med students. It feels like sometimes that can be a really good opportunity to take that maybe at a different institution. For me, that was OChem 2. I knew that there was just no way I was going to be able to balance OChem 2 with the rest of my classes and still be able to perform well in it. So I took it as an opportunity to do OChem 2 over the summer. I think really sort of being strategic about maybe which classes are just like too difficult to balance with a full course load during the school year. Those are really great opportunities to take those either during the summer where you can just focus all your time on it, or even at a different institution. And I promise you, like at the end of the day, like medical schools do not really look at institutions that differently. So if you got a B at a top tier institution versus an A at a school at like maybe a community college where the course is a little bit easier, they're not really going to take that into account and fully like factor the difference in it. I think another really good opportunity for summer coursework is it can be really hard as a pre-med applicant to like study abroad if that's something that you're interested in. I took a couple courses abroad during summers that were just like quick month-long courses through my school. And I know that there are a lot of universities that actually offer that opportunity. And if you're somebody who wants to have this experience, one of mine was healthcare related at Oxford, and the other was a Spanish and history class in Spain. So they were two very different things, but they were great opportunities just to sort of like scratch that itch to study abroad if you haven't had time to fill that in your schedule, and that's something that you're really looking to do while you're in college.
Thank you both for those tips. All right, summer programs.
Yeah, I think this one is mine. So summer programs are designed for aspiring healthcare professionals to provide a structured academic learning experience and hands-on opportunities with mentorship. So there are sometimes pre-med summer programs that are offered by your university, or sometimes they're offered by like certain hospitals or medical organizations. Usually the goal of these are to, one, provide like didactic instruction. So they're teaching you something in regards to the medical field, as well as getting you like clinical exposure. So whether that's through shadowing or volunteering, there's a lot of really high quality hybrid programs that sort of combine these two interests that also, while you're learning something in a didactic setting, you're also combining that with either volunteer experience or shadowing experience. Usually the summer programs tend to be more brief in length if they're just like clinically oriented. Sometimes they're just like 2 to 4 weeks. I think there are fewer maybe that are like 8 weeks long. That's all I have for summer programs. I don't know if Neil maybe has any more input.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to add here. I did one of these like a pre-med camp, but it was actually back in high school, so I didn't really do much in my undergrad years. I don't have much personal experience here, but I agree with everything Nate said.
All right. Study for the MCAT. This is a big one, and we do have quite a few webinars on the MCAT itself, so feel free to go look at those on our website for free. But yeah, you want to dive into this a little bit?
Yeah, the scary stuff. So yeah, I think studying for the MCAT during the summer depends heavily on when you're deciding on taking the MCAT. I think for example, if you're going to take the MCAT in April of your junior year, that starting to study in the summer could sound like a bit of overkill, at least to me. I mean, it never hurts to start studying early, in my opinion. You can build some basics, but really hardcore devoting yourself to many hours a day, looking through your MCAT books doesn't make a lot of sense to me if it's nearly a year out. That being said, if you are planning on taking it a bit earlier, like you're taking a gap year and want to take it in the fall of your senior year, for example, then I think starting to study during the summer is a great idea. And the summer, again, is dedicated time that you have where your schedule is a bit more flexible, depending on what else you're doing, I guess. And it's a bit more moldable to what you want to do with it. So I think it could be a good time to jumpstart your studying, or at least develop a study plan for when the MCAT starts to roll around down the line.
Yeah, like Neil said, I was actually the gap year applicant that took it early in my senior fall. So I was studying mostly over the summer. I thought personally, I recommend to a lot of pre-med applicants, if you are at all interested in doing a gap year, to study over the summer, because I think it's a really excellent opportunity to be undistracted from your studies for the MCAT. It is a long journey. Usually it takes like 2 to 3 months to really get a solid foundation where you're ready to take the test. But I think that I would not have been as successful on my MCAT had I not taken that like uninterrupted time. I was doing a couple activities, just like I was scribing a few times a week, but besides that, it really allowed, and I was still living my life. Like, you don't have to let the MCAT take up all of your time. You can still like take that opportunity to go on a trip for a few days. But I think over the summer is a really excellent time just to be uninterrupted. And I think because the MCAT is like such a marathon, and like keeping all that knowledge together, being able to like really be devoted for a short amount of time rather than like spreading it over the course of a semester, I think usually makes for more effective studying. And I think most people, from at least my personal experience, just anecdotally, and other people I know, I think the people who took the strategy of taking a summer to study for the MCAT and then taking the exam were generally just more successful than those who were balancing a course load during the school year and trying to add MCAT studying on top of it.
All right, let's talk about identifying goals and interests, which will help you develop your application as you begin working on that.
Yeah, so I am always a huge proponent of the activities that you choose to pursue as a pre-med should align with your interests. You shouldn't just do an activity because you feel like it checks a box. Usually admissions committees, we can sort of see through if you like did hundreds and hundreds of hours of hospital volunteering, but you hated every minute of it. So I think it's a really good opportunity to, again, take stock of the activities you've completed, where your application is sort of at, and reflect on like what you are actually interested in and pursue the goals that are related to those interests. So that may mean a slight pivot from the activities you've already been doing, and that's totally okay. It's also a great opportunity to get exposure with different medical specialties, like we've talked about with shadowing. But if there's one that you're specifically highly interested in, maybe it's a really great opportunity to get involved with volunteering in that specific specialty or doing research in that specialty. So you can make sure that you really do have a solid foundational idea that you're interested in it. So again, like we said before, taking stock of your application, assessing your strengths and skills, and your opportunities for improvement. So if there are opportunities to improve in your application, or just aspirations you have skill-wise, things that you want to gain or things that you want to accomplish before entering medical school, these are really great times to do that. Even if it's not directly healthcare related, there can still be many great opportunities outside of the traditional pre-med realm that'll look really great on a medical school application. I think the most important thing is doing activities that you're passionate about, because those really shine through in the application. They build you as a candidate, and you usually get something mutually beneficial out of it. The hours that you're putting into it, you're also getting personal development skill-wise, intellectually, as well as just sort of refining your motivations. I'll hand it over to Neil if he has any.
Yeah, super well said, Nate. I agree with everything that you said. I think just taking a step even farther back from being a pre-med, all of this undergrad, I think is a time to explore a lot of things that you may never get to explore again. So if you have any itch to scratch, if there's any intellectual pursuit or non-intellectual pursuit that you're interested in exploring, again, this summers you have dedicated time to do so. I mean, keep in mind that you have a pre-med application to put together, and it's important to put together something strong if you want to get into medical school. My personal anecdote is that for my freshman year after my summer, I scrambled for a research lab. The next summer I planned ahead, got some research funding, did some more research. The third summer I had applied to medical school. I was doing my secondaries, and I decided to do an internship in finance because it's something that I just never knew a lot about. It's something that I wanted to learn about, and it's something that I thought would have probably no impact on my medical school application, but I found interesting. And I think undergrad is a time that you get to explore those sorts of interests of yours without any repercussions for the most part. You don't have to take time off of work later on in your life. Medical school is going to be a bit of a grind. There's not going to be a ton of dedicated time off like there is in undergrad. So again, just thinking about what you're interested in, what you're passionate in, I think is so important to deciding what you want to do in your summers. And the funny story is it ended up being sort of a plus that I did that internship because a lot of people asked about it. A lot of people asked what I did that summer, and they found it super interesting that I just did something totally off the beaten path. So follow what you're interested in, and I think it'll do well for you later on.
Totally agree. Those like fascinating off the beaten path activities are always pique the interest of interviewers because they've seen a lot of people who have done hospital volunteering, seen a lot of people who have done shadowing, but like that's something new that maybe is a new conversation that they get to have after they've interviewed 10s, 20s of applicants.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll go over a couple tips for finding experiences for the summer, and then we'll open up the Q&A. So keep popping questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those in just a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So the tips for finding experiences in the summer. I mean, there's so many experiences, first of all, that you could possibly do that I think thinking about what you want to do is the most important. Once you've narrowed down a few things that you're interested in doing, that's the time you start to use some online resources, maybe kind of Googling, figuring out what sorts of requirements different programs have, maybe even connecting to different opportunities via opportunities you were looking for. Looking at different institutions and what they offer. The internet is a wide place and you can find a lot of stuff on there. That's when this process starts to get rolling. I think starting early is so important just because this can take time. The applications can take time, networking can take time. And by the time you get around to actually submitting something, it may be a few months after you've sort of started this process. I think your local network is super important in helping find opportunities. A lot of the people that you work with have done this a long time. They've mentored a lot of students and they've seen the different paths the students have taken. So they may have some idea of what might suit your interests or things that historically students from your institution have had an easier time getting a hold of. So reaching out to your advisors, professors, maybe even people you did research with in the past, volunteered with, different physicians, is a great idea, I think, and building that network as early as possible as soon as you start getting into undergrad is going to be beneficial to you. I never really attended too many career fairs, but I think those are good opportunities just to meet more people, and you really never know what sorts of opportunities are going to come out of that. I personally, so this is not a thing that most medical students do, but I created a LinkedIn pretty early on in undergrad, and you'd be kind of surprised at the opportunities that come through LinkedIn, especially if you have a robust profile and kind of put a little work into making it pretty. Online networking is important now. I think in medicine, even Twitter is becoming a little bit bigger to find opportunities with different mentors, even at different institutions or other social networking platforms for that matter. So I think putting yourself out there is a great way early on to start cultivating these opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree with Neil about starting early. I think a really good time to start to plan your summer is actually the winter break before that summer, to start combing through and organize first, like figuring out what exactly you're interested in, and then going and looking for the opportunities that you can find online that align with those interests. You can also reach out to your pre-health office, or even older students at your school often are a huge untapped knowledge base. So if you have any friends who are maybe a class year above you and that are pre-med, they're a great opportunity to ask. But a lot of those application deadlines usually can come up pretty early in the spring. I've seen as early as February, and some that are in, actually, I've also seen January too. And usually a lot of them have deadlines that like are around March. So if you're scrambling, it can be really difficult. You also want to have the amount of time, if you need to find a letter of recommendation, that you can give your letter writer adequate amount of time to write a letter on your behalf for that program.
Thanks for those tips. All right, couple more.
Yeah, so obviously use the local hospitals and clinics that are going to be in the area wherever you're going to be at that summer. So if you're staying around your university or school, check and see what local hospitals and clinics are in the area, look around, and consider even other schools and institutions that are maybe in your local area. I was in Los Angeles, so there were opportunities at UCLA or at Cedars-Sinai that maybe weren't through my home institution, but still things that I could apply to. Other community organizations. I would also look into public health organizations. They oftentimes have really excellent opportunities for students, especially if you're the student who's maybe not interested in such classic clinical research or bio or neuroscience. And then so customize your approach. So you want to tailor those applications and cover letters, resumes to highlight your specific interests and skills and experiences relevant to each opportunity. I think that's a really important step, is to consider what you're applying to, what relevant skills you bring to the table, and then be consistent in your outreach. There is a lot of challenge of being really persistent in medicine. Sometimes the person who gets it is the person who is the most persistent. I've heard lots of stories of like, I was ignored by my PI for like 6 months. And then they were like, okay, I've got a position for you. So being persistent can be really important, and like show that you're enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the role that you're applying for, and that you're just not applying just to apply.
Fantastic.
And I'll add that this last point here, tailoring your approach or customizing your applications can go a long way, I think. I mean, I personally found that to be true when I was applying to residency programs. It was the first time I put a lot of effort into doing that, and I got a pretty positive response from doing so. I think a lot of people think that it may come off as cheesy or come off as ingenuine, but I think if you really put an effort into it, research what the program is that you're applying to, or the person is that you're hoping to be mentored by, and kind of tailor your application to them, tell them what you're going to learn by working with them or being a part of their program, and what you can bring to their program specifically based on their needs, that'll go a long way. And it kind of shows dedication and interest that other people may not be putting in. So that's just a little tidbit that I think personally has worked well for me.
All right. Thank you both so much for all of this information. See, we have a few Q&A questions here, so we'll just dive into those. And yeah, keep popping in the questions if you have them. So how can I get involved in research internships if I have no experience in research at all? Are there some things you can do beforehand to kind of jumpstart that?
Yeah, I think summers are actually a really great opportunity to get first exposure or first experience with research. There are a lot of specific research internships and fellowships that are designed for people who have never had research experience, especially if you are a student who is underrepresented in medicine. There are a lot of programs specifically tailored to get first exposure to medical research and involvement. And they also offer really great didactic experiences where they teach you about how to be a physician scientist. So I think you shouldn't sweat it too much if you've never had research before. If you want to start to build your research experience during the fall or during the spring semesters to become more competitive for these research positions, that's also a great opportunity to sort of bolster your application there before. But it's not a prerequisite to get involved with these research programs. Many of the summer ones, they know that this may be your first exposure, and some of them are even tailored for people who it is their first exposure to research.
Great, thank you. How many research programs should one embark on if you've already done a summer research program? Are there a certain number of hours that you should hit, or a certain number of research opportunities you should have for your resume?
Yeah, I don't think there's like a set number per se or a set number of hours to hit. I think the more research you do, it may just make your application look a little bit more robust. But say, for example, you had a really productive research summer, you even got a publication out of it, maybe, and you're just sick of it or you don't want to do it anymore. I don't think it's a bad idea to try something else for a summer. If you love it and want to keep doing it, I don't think there's any limit or any number of hours that somebody's going to say is too much. But I definitely don't think there's a requirement. I think a lot of people have a different paths to medical school. I wouldn't even say any research is necessarily a requirement. I think doing something that you can speak to confidently, something that you took a lead role in, is the most important part of it. And demonstrating some knowledge of the subject matter that you worked on is important. I think if you can do all of those things, there's no set hours or number of experiences you necessarily need to hit.
Great. How many hours of working / scribing did you do when you studied over the summer?
Yeah, I think that question's for me. So I actually had a really busy, full summer that summer. And I look back at that summer and I think it was a blast. I had a ton of fun. I started off, I studied abroad in Spain for a month. I came back and then started picking up my scribing role and studying for the MCAT at the same time. All in all, I studied for the MCAT for about 2.5 months. And I was probably scribing maybe about 16 hours-ish a week. And I was still living my life during that time. I still went on family trips. I did some studying during those family trips, but I still went. And I think it's really feasible to find that balance, especially over the summer when maybe you're only working on 1 or 2 activities. It's all about where you start foundationally, sort of with the MCAT. That depends on how much time it's going to take you to study for it. But I think having that summer, having a summer to study is just an excellent time to be really not distracted by most other things that are happening during the school year.
Great, thanks. So I'm doing a gap year before starting college. Do you have any recommendations for how they can spend their year to just begin building their pre-med profile?
Yeah, I mean, before college is even earlier than most people. So, I mean, I think if there's something that, number one, you're really interested in exploring, you should explore it. If you're looking for something specific to pre-meds, I think something that would be really useful personally is getting some research experience where you are doing something statistical. So if you can develop some useful skill for future labs down the line, you'll appreciate it. I personally don't think you need to start like studying or anything before college starts. I don't think you need to do anything super academic. I think if you're interested in finding out whether you want to go down the pre-med path, you can do some volunteering, you can do some shadowing, you can do some scribing even. If you want to travel, if you have the funds to do that, maybe that's a good time to do it. Some undergrad programs make it a little more difficult during the undergrad period just because of a course load requirement that you may have, like Nate was talking about before. But yeah, I mean, if there are any other ideas you have of things you want to do, I say go for it. That's the time to explore, in my opinion.
Awesome. I'm seeing a couple questions here about folks who are inquiring about opportunities for shadowing or building shadowing research, all of kind of everything we've talked about for international students. I think that you should definitely schedule a consultation with us and we can talk more about your specific circumstances. It's pretty dependent on where you are and what your experience is. But like very briefly, Neil, do you have any just like high level tips for international prospective students?
Yeah, I mean, I think being an international student does come with a bit of an uphill battle, unfortunately, in the United States. I think what's really important is to leverage your network as much as possible. People that you know in the community, people that friends and family, local hospitals, like we said before, any of the networking tools that we've sort of talked about already, I think are still applicable to international students. If you have had any opportunity to do research in the United States, or if you have worked with mentors who have connections here, whether abroad or here in the States, then I think leveraging those is important. And I think, just researching online as well. I think, like Nate said, there are a lot of opportunities, especially for people who are a bit more underrepresented in the field of medicine to date. There are a lot of organizations willing to support you. And I think it's important to try and seek those out for yourself. So use all the resources at your disposal. And I think there are people willing to help.
Great, thanks. Nate, do you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is if you find programs that you're interested in, reach out to the program director and just explain your situation and your interests and see if it is feasible that they can work with you to find something that would make it a fit. I know there are different requirements for different hospitals, but different universities may be accustomed to having international students. So just reaching out with the program officers and directors and seeing if they're able to work with you on that situation, sort of on a case-by-case basis, is usually maybe the most effective way if you are really passionate about being involved in that activity.
Great. All right, and then do medical scribe jobs require certifications or previous training?
No, that's one of the beauty of scribing usually, is that a lot of the training happens on the job, meaning you are getting paid for it. So from my knowledge, most places do not require prior certification. It maybe has changed a little bit in the last few years, but I think the bulk of companies are looking for people who just like have a high school diploma and an interest in pursuing a career in the medical field. And they're usually great to work with you if you are on the pre-med journey. They're really interested in you as a scribe because they know that you are a bright person who is going to contribute a lot to the efficiency of their hospital.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all of your answers to these questions. And Neil and Nate, it was great to have you here and walk us through this topic. And everyone who joined us, thank you so much. So glad that you could be here. We'll send out an email in the coming days with a recording of this webinar, and you'll also be able to find it on our website. as well. And feel free to schedule a consultation if you have any questions about planning, applications, anything at all. We are here to help you. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Hallie, for organizing this.
Yep. Good luck,
Absolutely.
everyone.